Hi there, it's André with the Impulsive Thinker podcast. I'm here today with my good friend John Warkentin. If you remember him from the first interview of the series. After that interview, we had a nice little chat about hyperactivity and how it was key to our success, but at the same time, it became a disorder when we're undiagnosed. And at times, for me, it can become a disorder because when I forget about it. But yeah, John, welcome back from Saskatchewan. He's got 3 successful businesses and trying to change the construction world with his energy efficient housing developments. How are you doing, buddy?
Great. Yourself?
So far, so good. What I really liked about our post-interview conversation last time, we were talking about the anxiety created by not doing work. And that had to do with a lot of the hyperactivity. And that really got me thinking, because hyperactivity for most adults disappear once they get into adulthood. And usually that converts or gets transformed into mental hyperactivity where your brain won't start. But for adults to be physically hyperactive, it's very rare. And I've got that too. I still fidget a great deal. I got to keep moving. And then when we were having that conversation and I was listening to the interview again, I never put the two and two together. Is me becoming a workaholic was not necessarily me being required to be mentally or intellectually stimulated. It was also physical. So I always had to be on the move, always doing something. And if I didn't burn physical energy in a certain way, when I first started my engineering career, I did a lot of physical inspections. I was out in the field all the time. So I was physically moving a lot, which help me with my symptoms. But once I got more focused in the office, because I started having a team building my engineering department, I had less physical means to burn that energy. And that's where my impulsivity got worse and whatnot. And I got bored because I wasn't moving enough. Can you give me more details about this hyperactivity part side of your ADHD? And how it affected you? And I just want this conversation, John. Just go and we'll go.
Yeah. No, so I mean, back in '93, got through university, moved home, got married. The 2 things we were working on at that point in time was farming, because I'm a grain farmer. I farm with my wife and 2 boys. But that started out with us, my wife and I, we both grew up on a farm, so helping our parents at that point. So we're involved in the farm work. Obviously, that's fairly physically active. There's some seat time in the tractor, combine, and so forth. But you're always up doing something. I also got into the real estate appraisal industry, and up until probably 10 years ago, I was doing residential appraisal work as well as commercial, and that's very, very much short sprint. So you get a file you're working on, you literally go inspect the property, come back, you work on it, you type it up for an hour or 2, and you get it out. So my day was very broken up by getting up, moving, driving here, checking that. And then with the 2 businesses, I was bouncing back and forth between them. So, and even to this day, I got a truck, it's got all my tools, my stuff for the farm, hitches, so forth. I never know when I get up and leave the house, whether I'm going to be working in one of the 3 businesses or how my day is going to go. I never really thought of it in the way you just presented it, but I think it's because, I need to have that. I couldn't sit down and work for 8 hours straight on one thing at a computer. I need to be able to work in short, hyper-focused bursts, and then get up and do something else.
Now, is it really hyper-focused bursts, or is it more the fact that you're creating false pressure by always being on the go and jumping from one thing to another? Because you said it's about how it's, you go out, you do a bunch of stuff, you do appraisals, you look at a building, and then the next morning you got to get up and get that report out because it has to be done the next day. So I remember in my started the career, and when I started objective engineering, was I always had emergencies the next morning. And realizing what I know now, those were all self-created. just so that my brain can perk up, dopamine hit. The more pressure there is, the more it's interesting and it's rapid fire. So our brain's firing.
Like, I mean, so that's a to-do list. That's what's got to get done today or yesterday, whatever it was.
So there's about 15 things on the list.
Yeah. So I'm 100% a dopamine addict. What I do is, yeah, everything's a panic. I mean, I procrastinate. It drives my wife and probably the people that work with me crazy. You know, I leave it till the end, and then I absolutely lock in and get it done in as short amount of time as I can. And then I bounce. I mean, it's no different. I mean, we just got done the combining season at the farm, which is a huge deal. I think most farmers, producers, you know, breathe a sigh of relief and take a little break. And because I didn't tell customers, you're going to have to wait till October in the appraisal business. I said, I'll be done on this day in September. I created a backup of work. The minute I get done at the farm, I'm right into this backlog of work that's panic to get out. So the last 2 weeks or week or whatever it's been, I'm absolutely scrambling. But, you know, 100% what you're saying, I created it. I gave them the expectation that they could have this all, you know, I probably booked a month worth of work to get done in 2 weeks. The exact time I quit, I finished combine.
Right.
I mean,
so, and that's the other thing too, is like, I think you said is perfectly, you knew combining was coming to an end, right? And you created a list of things that needed to get done once you're done. So there's two aspects to that, is that like the one thing that really hit me hard in March, I'll talk about it in another episode, is ADHDers have this tendency to go in post-success depressions. Once the task or the big goal is achieved, there's nothing. So now the brain has a big down. We haven't figured out what to do next. There's nothing interesting anymore, or novel or urgent. And then our brain just has this big attack or like a big panic, and we can get into this depression. So the key to fix that is also making sure you have something to work on. Now, what you said there, having months worth of work and wanting to do in 2 weeks, that's where the fine line is. We still got to be rational and realize that, you know, having that stuff scheduled is good for that aspect and not getting that post-success or completion depression. But at the same time, we don't want to overwhelm ourselves with too much, because then that can still have the same effect of not working out well, emotional dysregulation, and then the other people suffer on that. Does that make sense?
Yeah, 100%. And what happens is, and you know, because we've had discussions about this before, if I've got a 50-page report that's got to get done, and I've given myself, truthfully, half of what I probably should have, and set that expectation for that customer, I mean, that's a deadline, a priority. I lock into it, and then nothing else matters, right? So then
you create an urgency. You created an urgency that the brain thrives for. The ADHD thrives for it. We do that. It's got to be new. It's got to be interesting. It's got to be novel and urgent. Well, and one of those three out, it's hard to get our brains going.
Yeah, and so I mean, I always had, since '93, basically, I've had these two industries or these two businesses I've worked in, and then by, I guess it was 2007, I kind of figured them out, right? There was, we took them, you know, call it 10 times. I mean, it really was. We took both those things 10 times what they were when we started them. And I wasn't bored physically because I had lots to do, but mentally, I'm like, you know, you and I are the same way that way. What's next? So then I created another business, but I didn't change all those expectations that I had for myself or I'd given to other people in the first two. And, you know, and the other thing that I haven't been really good at figuring out is, you know, you experienced it, but because we can be super productive, I've never been good at predicting how quickly things grow. Like
we're horrible at time. We're time blind.
Yeah. So, I mean, I go into it thinking, you know, it was fine last year, it'll be good this year, but, you know, I don't rationally go through and say, I've done this much work last year, so we need to budget for this many files or this many projects, and it needs to be at that. It's like, oh, we did that last year. Well, we can take on a little more. It's no big deal, right? So
more urgency.
Right. Yeah. You just,
Yeah.
so the minute I kind of get something figured out, it's like you want to push up against that rev limiter all the time. So the problem for
Yeah.
me, once I got to the point where literally my body wasn't taking it anymore, truthfully, my wife probably wouldn't have put up with me for very, very many more years if I kept going the way I was. Then the question, how I approached that, for myself was, you look at what other people are telling you to do, right? Because I literally worked to the point where it wasn't working. And
You're
everybody
referring
told
to
me,
self-care, right?
yeah, like
Self-care.
literally, I mean, I think I mentioned this on that other podcast, but I ended up in the hospital over a couple of years, a couple of times for things that really had to do with me pushing it too hard. I mean, that's really what it came down to. My family time had dropped off. Kim was almost single parenting. I mean, these aren't positive things for your life. The problem is that I viewed being active or being productive as work. I self-medicated by creating urgency, creating projects, doing all these things. The dopamine hits of the to-do list where I knock them off, bang, bang, bang. I was very good at it. We got a lot done. We were productive. We were making money. When that didn't work, everybody told me, turn it down. So I'm like running at 10, turn it down to 5. I tried that for like literally 10 years. We bought a boat trailer, we went on holidays, all those things were pretty good, but I tried running it, hired staff, didn't expand, well, a little bit, but not a lot, and just tried to run at a lower level. The problem is that in hindsight, I wasn't happy there either.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
We
don't want to work all those hours, but we feel this need to have to.
Yeah.
And I want to go back on that because that falls into playing a character. I think, we were raised that way to be the only way you're productive is by working, and only hard workers put a lot more hours. And then I also want to touch more about how, your wife became a single parent, just like my wife, because we always put work first. Because I think there's two aspects of it. There's the ADHD brain doing its thing, but at the same time, it's cultural and societal, which I think are still, because of ADHD, we were told it has to be this way, and we worked hard to make it work. But at the same time, that's a habit. So what I discovered with times, I had to get out of this work habit.
Well, and I think there's one more thing is I'm viewed by people around me, which I wish it wasn't that case, but we all care about, when we're successful. Well, where was I successful? It was hammering out work, right? Society, when I'm at home, I mean, I can't organize things, right? I mean, if I had to run the kids' schedules, if I had to do those things that are normal to be around the house, I mean, am I successful at that? No, I actually totally suck at that, right? I need somebody to organize my life. And so what happens is you got a situation where you go to work, you're financially successful, people are telling you you're successful because you're putting out all this work, you're doing a good job. And then your home life, which you do care about, is a wreck if you have to actually organize and do it. Because truthfully, I don't know how it is for you, but if I got to figure out how everything's going to work and function at the house and the kids back then and all that stuff, I mean, Kim had to do it because truthfully, my brain, even at the office, nobody would get me to organize anything because I'm not wired that way. So I think a part of it too is, the things we're good at don't always fit well in, the normal functioning family. And then you get the flip side where you get rewarded at work for being productive.
Yeah, for me, I think the key issue there is actually, it's not that you can't organize, is that you weren't physically there. I know that's what's key with me was I wasn't home physically a lot. And it took me a long time. I think I just realized this a year or two ago. The kids and my wife didn't care that I wasn't doing a lot of quote unquote productive at home. I was just never there. Just being there, hanging out, not even doing nothing, that means a lot to them. So I think with the hyperactivity, the workaholism, or this the pressure from society to be, or our generation, the way we were raised, to only be successful is to work hard and longer. But not physically being home is actually what's killing the relationships more than the tactical things to do, the issues at home. I think to me, that was a big eye opener. And I think that's key to a lot of us, is to stop. I had to get out of the habit of having or of needing to work all the time. And then with the ADHD diagnosis, the need was neurological, and it was a habit that was created for others. So you can still make the decision you don't want to do that anymore, but you still got to break the habit, which takes time. So,
I think that's where, for me, that was 2008 when I'm like, okay, this can't work. You got to do something different. And, now we're at 2021, and lots of things I've had to figure out along the way. But the biggest thing for me was I needed to break this whole idea that, being productive meant working, creating
correct.
income.
Yep.
Like, I was completely locked in on the whole idea where, I need to be busy, I need to be working, I need to be productive all the time. And producing income is what I totally locked into. And, through, strategic coach, through different programs I've done, through reading, what ended up happening, I guess, luckily is that what I now view as being productive is drastically different than what it was in 2008. So for me, I'm not perfect at it. And, for me, it's probably the same as you. If I don't create a habit around it, stuff doesn't get done. But trying to create a habit around, meditation and exercise and, some downtime or family time, what I realized after, a lot of things that have happened is that all those things are productive too. They don't generate income, so to speak, but they produce results, which I think is what we thrive on. They produce results that are important to me. So,
right. And you've given yourself permission to make that importance key rather than push it aside because it's a personal, you're being selfish. For me, a lot of times I'm being selfish that I want more time myself or time off. I felt guilty not working when my staff was working. So you're giving yourself permission to take time off and give yourself a break.
Yeah. And that break doesn't have to be doing nothing. So the key for me is when people told me I'm supposed to take a holiday, I viewed it as sitting on a lawn chair.
Oh,
that doesn't work for me, right? So, but I mean, exercise is a good example. I never exercised up until, a few years ago, because again, if it took an hour or half an hour out of my day, I thought it was a waste, right?
Yeah. Yep. Yeah, you're not the only one. I think everyone's listening right now would definitely be going, makes sense.
Yeah. So, if you and I talked about the book Spark, in the ADHD book or ADHD 2.0 book.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, what I realized is that the physical activity is important to stabilizing the mental side of anybody's health, but, specifically ADHD. So, for me, is it unproductive to take a half hour every morning and do some cardio? It's not. I know intellectually that that's very important to the success of my overall productivity and my health. Health's another one. I mean, I think there's a high likelihood that we're going to live past 100 years old. Do I want to be crippled up and stuck in a lazy boy from 80 on? No, I mean, I don't want that.
Yeah.
So now I can reposition something like, exercise or yoga that, I mean, it's going to extend the productivity of my life by probably could be 20 years,
mm-hmm.
right? But I mentally needed to get to the point where I accepted the fact there were other things that were going to do something. It didn't have to be just what would create productivity that morning when I got out of bed,
mm-hmm.
right? I was looking at it very short term or maybe a month window.
Well, yeah, we don't look future or past. It's what right now.
Right. So, really trying to lock into the fact that, hey, these other things are super important. I mean, even a relationship with your wife or your kids.
Yeah.
The problem is when I was working all the time, I broke it down to what had to get done that day,
Mhm.
so, we were fortunate that Kim stayed home with the kids. And, basically on this whole thing, we were, um, I was looking at it exactly like you said, super short term. So, and maybe that is the difference, right? Now
Mhm.
my perspective on what's productive includes a whole bunch of things, and it's probably looking out 5, 10, 20 years.
And I think having just said that, I think it really brings the next point that really hit me last time we chatted. It was, when you're doing nothing, especially when you're hyperactive, it created anxiety. And looking back, I can actually attribute to 99% of my anxiety was because I had nothing to do, or I was bored, or the fear of being bored was the other one. So I don't know if you can relate to this or this makes sense to you, but I think a lot of that anxiety created more of needing to work on stuff now to get it done now. So I don't have, for me, it was so I don't have to do it later. And the next thing I know, it's missed dinner. Um, it's now come home and my wife and kids are in bed because it's midnight. But it was just always that one more thing. And I think that's a key thing for people to realize. I think hyperactivity does create anxiety. It's not necessarily, it's not a comorbidity that you're an anxious person. It's just that the ADHD and the thirst for interest and engaging stuff to try and get a hyper focus creates anxiety for us to trick ourselves to get our stuff working. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, and that was, as you become more self-aware, it's easier to pick up those feelings of anxiety. Because I think for me, especially after I tried turning it down, it showed up in lack of contentment. It just,
Yeah,
I
huge.
wasn't, I wasn't okay. It just, and that's one thing that the unique ability training coach really helped me with. Um, there was a lack of contentment there. Yeah, I was successful financially by how people around me viewed me, but
Mhm.
it was like an underlying uneasiness that, playing at 5 or not doing things or trying to, lay back and be calmer, it just wasn't in line with how I am.
Yeah.
Right? So now I want to bring back that stuff to a level where I am, that uneasiness goes away and we solve the need to be going all the time, but just include the stuff that's productive outside of business, right? Like I
Well,
said,
managing it, just to
exercise.
manage it. Yeah.
Yeah, but even exercise, adding exercise, diet, time off, those things are all super positive for the future too. But as long as we can include that in what kind of solves those problems, then it's not totally focused on work.
No, and then what you did was actually redefine productivity to allow you to have free time to exercise. And I think that's key. That's my two big takeaways from this conversation, John, is redefining productivity from solely work and monetary gain to also health, family, and free time. Like I can't calm down. I can only relax. And then when I redefine that, I can find calm and gave my permission. That was huge. And number two for me was definitely we were never content. Contentment is a very tough thing for us, especially when we're trying to live to other people's expectations. And then now I am starting to. It's a cognitive effort on my part till it becomes a habit to be content with what I got, where I'm going, and where it's not where I'm going, it's actually where we are right now in the stage of a project. I wanted it to be done, but if we're halfway through, I got to be content that we're growing, looking back to where we are now. What's your
Yeah.
biggest takeaway from today?
Yeah, and I mean that kind of brings it full circle. I mean, the contentment and the progress I've made is in redefining productivity. And my wife has said many times that I'm never content. And the truth is, by how other people view me, I'm probably not.
Yeah,
Right?
amen.
My contentment is in progress and working towards something. And I can be happy with where I am today, but I don't think we're ever done. There's always progress. If
No,
I'm not
can't.
progressing, I'm uneasy about the whole thing.
No, can't stop. That the hyperactivity won't allow it in my intellectual requirement that I've really defined and understood lately. It's I gotta be intellectually engaged a lot of times just to keep going.
Right.
So let's put it this way. Okay, listeners, I want you guys to think about this. Contentment. Are you content with what you're achieving? And if you're not, look back. I think let's challenge you to start to be content and be happy with what you achieved. And take a look at your definition of productivity. I think that's a key word John's been using. Work, not at redefining work for relaxation of it, but being productive, which is a hyperactivity thing. But if your hyperactivity is in your brain where it won't stop, the same rules apply. Let's try to redefine productivity so we can allow ourselves for more health related stuff, family especially, and to redefine it so that when we're with family or we're doing personal things like reading or your hobbies, that's productivity. You are being productive, but just not work related. See if you can do that. And I'd like to hear from you guys about that. So you can send an email to questions@theimpulsivethinker.com or go to the website and drop us a note there or in the comments down below. Wow, John, I wish we can do this for another hour, but I got to go for lunch now.
All good.
But thanks again. I appreciate your time and conversation. And thank you to the listeners for showing up again and letting us meander and babble, and hope that you learn, and hope to to see you soon. Please subscribe and share this episode if you think it'll be a benefit to anyone. Thanks again. Thanks, John. We'll talk to you soon.
Yeah.
Have a good day, everyone.